Hey Geekscapists, welcome to a brand new Geekscape podcast. I'm Jonathan London, your host. And if this is your first Geekscape, strap yourselves in for some pop culture talk, movies, video games, comic books, TV, all of that pop culture goodness that exists out here in the Geekscape. We started this show, wow, it's like over 18 years. Is it over 18 years? We started the show in 2006. I've been podcasting since 2005, filmmaking since just before that. And in that time, I've written comics, video games, movies, all sorts of stuff, and continue to direct as a filmmaker and tell stories. And so I created a podcast where I could talk to other storytellers about storytelling and share the storytelling talk and the pop culture talk specifically with the audience. Sorry I missed another week. I'm becoming a dad, and it is clearly messing up my schedule here with Geekscape. We didn't have an episode last week or the 2 weeks prior, but I got to tell you that Adam Nimoy episode is getting some love. Having Leonard Nimoy's son on the podcast last episode, don't rush to listen to it quite yet, folks, if you haven't heard it. I got Lilah Sturges on the show today talking about her brand new graphic novel, The Science of Ghosts, from Legendary Comics, and we're going to be talking about that. So there's a lot of comics talk on the show, but that Adam Nimoy conversation has been coming back to me several times in the 2 weeks since. The very next day, I went on a trail run with someone, and he asked about what I do, and somebody introduced me about the podcast, and he goes, "What's your podcast about?" And I tried to explain it, and I mentioned that I just had Adam Nimoy on, and this individual said, I know Adam. Adam, when I first moved to LA, helped get me sober. And that is part of that conversation that was beautiful. And again, listen to this conversation, especially if you're watching this live on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, LinkedIn. How's the job market out there? And don't rush to listen to that episode. Put it in, just download it because we got a good live show here. But several people have commented on what a touching episode that is, and I just want to say thanks to Adam for being so candid, writing an incredibly candid book, and for coming on Geekscape and talking to me about it, because I was moved by it. It was a very hard conversation to do. It was clearly emotional, and I'm clearly freaking out about being a dad, and here we are talking to Adam Nimoy about his dad, one of the most famous people in all of pop culture and science fiction. And thank you so much for all the feedback on that episode. I'm really moved by it, and that's just what I want to do here. I want to keep talking about storytelling and our own existence as humans, and it's not always easy. Maybe we have experiences like, I'm going to get mad, but our Supreme Court going ahead and stripping the protections that every common person has against, a dictatorship. I really don't love going too political on the show, because I know that my audience goes across the entire stratum politically, and I try and be respectful of everybody's thoughts. But if you're not registered to vote, what the F are you doing? And maybe you believe like, I don't know which bus. Both buses aren't good this year. And I'm thinking about the metaphor that you take the bus that takes you closer to your destination. And even if you have to walk a few miles after the bus that you get on stops, and it's a couple miles short of your destination, you effing walk. Because I'll tell you, the other bus is on fucking fire. And if you want to get on that bus, you're a fucking idiot. And I'll just say that on Geekscape, go ahead and shut it off. It's okay. But we are faced with people saying, I don't know which bus to take. Do you even know where you're going if one of the buses is clearly on fire and you're even contemplating it? No, you take the bus that takes you closer to your destination, as close as possible. And if you have to walk, you walk. I spent a couple days at the end of last week at a Latino filmmakers summit run by an organization called NALIP. We had our friend Joel Gonzalez on the show a few weeks ago. He runs Nosotros. NALIP is like a sister organization. I spent a couple days there with a bunch of Latino filmmakers. And I got to tell you, I met Dolores Huerta. If you don't know who Dolores Huerta is, please Google her. I actually taught Spanish earlier in my life at Dolores Huerta Middle School for a couple of days as a substitute teacher. And I got to tell Dolores Huerta, who's one of the heroes of our entire workers movement is. I mean, the Farmers Association here in America, like she empowered farmers, and she marched with Cesar Chavez. So if you want to get on a bus, don't take the one that's clearly on fire and spewing lies. And last time people took the bus, a lot of Americans died. Even if you don't think the other bus has what it takes to get you to your destination, yeah, you get as close as you can, and then you walk. And you carry other people when you walk. And it was amazing talking to Dolores Huerta and hearing her speak and taking a photo with her. I was fanboying out hard because she is an American hero. And I think that we're in a time where we need American heroes and we need people to be vocal, as I'm using my platform to do. Hopefully you're still listening. And that's about all I want to say. I want you all to be registered to vote and ready to protect our democracy in November. All right? We are going to talk a lot of comics today. I went to see Inside Out 2, and it made me cry. There's my review. I'm having a daughter in a month, and, the wheels are coming off of me mentally. But I'm keeping it together enough to vote to protect our democracy and have a daughter. And I went to see Inside Out 2, and Heidi and I just bawled pretty much for the last 30 minutes of that movie as we watched the female protagonist in that movie in all of her teen emotions vacillate and go back and forth. If you saw In and Out 1, you know what I'm talking about. And Pixar is that movie is raking it into the box office, and it's a fantastic movie, and it's beautiful. But man, as a parent to be of a young girl in a society that is starting to get a little scary for young girls and young women everywhere, and it's getting scary for all of us. I was freaking out in the last 30 minutes of Inside Out. All those emotions were running through me. So wow, it's good. It was awesome. I loved it. All right, let's talk comics. We're going to talk the science of ghosts. This is Geekscape. If you want to talk pop culture, you want to talk comic books, you are in the right place. We're on the road to Comic-Con. We started making the schedule of everybody signing. And we have so much to talk about in the next couple of weeks, but we're going to start right here with this episode with Lilah Sturges. Let's rock it to the Geekscape. All right, Geekscapists. It's Jonathan. Just like the theme song said, Jonathan's here to start the show. My guest is Lilah Sturges. Lilah wrote The Science of Ghosts, but Lilah is also a very accomplished writer in other comic book. She's basically just ticking off the publishers. If it's DC or it's this publisher, that publisher. Lumberjanes, the Infernal Compass. You guys know the Lumberjanes series over there. Is that Boom? Is that a Boom comic? The Magicians. You guys know this one, Jack of All Fables. It's part of the Fables group, Bill Winningham's series over there at DC Vertigo. Is Vertigo still a thing? I thought that the DC corporate was like, this Vertigo thing, what do we do with it? Well, I don't know. It's a really time-honored brand for the last 30 years. Maybe you should keep it, especially when you have a major series like Sandman on Netflix and all this stuff that came out of Vertigo popping off. Maybe keep the brand that's recognizable. I don't know. Who am I? All right. Lilah, welcome to Geekscape. How are you? Congrats on the book coming out.
Hi. Thank you so much. I am super glad to be here. You got my blood pumping with your introduction. You're talking about a lot of things that are very important to me, and I'm sure we'll get into them. But the thing that is top of mind for me right now is the breakdancing Spider-Man and the opening credits.
Yeah.
I want to know more about that. Breakdancing Spider-Man. Is that from a longer clip, or what do we know about him?
Lilah, that's stock. I've used some stock in that opening.
Really? Have
I
you?
haven't
That's not all
I
you?
haven't breakdanced in a long time, and nobody wants that. Nobody wants to see me breakdance. I'd like. No, I'm too old for that.
That's fine.
I'm too old for
That's
that.
fine.
The closest I got to Spider-Man was when my wife Heidi and I, when I proposed to her on the main stage of LA Comic Con with our good friend Giancarlo Esposito as my wingman, and I had Heidi wear a Spider-Man heart shirt like Mary Jane, and she was wearing it's a black shirt. It looks like
Hmm.
when Mary Jane first comes to Peter's door. And her aunt had set her up with, Mary Jane, and she goes, "Face it, Tiger, you just hit the jackpot." The famous splash page at the end of that Spider-Man issue, and Heidi was kind of dressed like Mary Jane in her jeans and all that, and she was just like, "Why are you so insistent that I wear this like Mary Jane outfit today? LA Comic Con is all weekend. Why are you so insistent?" I was like, "Well, and she was like, "You're up to something." So she knew. I think she knew I was going to propose, but did she know I was going to do it on the main stage with a Star Wars actor, with an actor from Better Call Saul and from The Boys? No, she did not.
She didn't know.
And she did not. And she's like, "Oh man, I would have worn a different outfit." No, it defeats the whole purpose of me fanboying out that a girl and my wife was basically wearing Mary Jane cosplay. And that's about as close as I got to Peter Parker. That or like incessant failures, which like happened to Peter. All these hiccups, always being late for things. That's Peter. But no.
I mean,
So
I was an unpopular teenager who was interested in science. That's as close as I think I ever got to Spider-Man.
yeah, talk about that because I think our friend David Bohr, who's been a part of Geekscape, and your other friend Tilly Bridges was just on about a year ago. So they wrote, if that's not an endorsement, Geekscape, is both those former Geekscape guests have written endorsements and pull quotes for this book, The Science of Ghosts, out by Legendary
Hmm.
Comics. And I'm reading this, I'm like, okay, The Science of Ghosts, but I actually thought it was going to have some personal stuff. The science of ghosts and the idea that there's a paranormal investigator that leans on science and studying the paranormal. Like I like that. I think it's been done, but I got to tell you what was fresh about this, what I enjoyed. And if you heard a door open, it's Heidi Geekscape. My Geekscape studio has been turned into a baby room, and so what I thought I enjoyed was very early on the idea of a trans lead character is made apparent to you, Geekscapists, and a lot of this book is also a very personal book. How much of it is personal? Because just like Peter Parker, and I think Peter Parker is a pretty good comparison, uh, even though you're dealing with the Green Goblin and all these, in this case, it's ghosts and the paranormal, even though you're dealing with all of these other things, you still have to deal with your personal life. That's a very Peter Parker, very Marvel thing. The main character still has a very personal life. In the personal life of our lead character in The Science of Ghosts, the old romantic life, the current romantic life, the push and pull, that stuff takes almost center stage in this.
Hmm.
Where did you make that decision to kind of put the high concept stuff of like ghost studying, ghost science, and also like a bit of the X Files ish, and say no, 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 this is going to have an equal pairing with someone's personal life and navigating that.
Sure. I think a lot of times when we're writing popular fiction, or something that's intended for uh, not a like a snooty literary audience, right? We want to you want to have some dessert with your dinner, and I feel like ghosts are like dessert, and dinner is like all of our fascinating facets that we have as human beings. Both make a complete meal, but I feel like if all you're talking about is, you know, what if ghosts could be examined scientifically? I mean, that's not much of a story. It's a premise, but it's not a story. And so for me, it's just about, you know, what are the things that I want to say about how it feels to be me right now, you know? And I think that the things that I wanted to talk about when I was writing Science of Ghosts is, you know, yes, I'm a trans person and I'm known as a trans person in a lot of ways, but I'm also not that. I also do. other things. And so I wanted to write a book that wasn't about being transgender. I wanted to write a book that was about a person doing her job and doing her best and having relationships and messing up and uh, eventually succeeding. And a story about ghosts is just the best way to go about doing that for me, you know.
Hmm.
Um, but it's always about the characters and who they are and what they're showing us, or hopefully, what they're trying to say.
Jackknife on YouTube just said, "Incessant Failure sounds like a great title for a comic book." Well, my autobiography, I mean. Jackknife, thanks for
Yeah.
watching. At the same time, I think it's an effective metaphor for someone whose past marriage, past relationship is lingering in the story,
Hmm.
right? So it's not just, I mean, so there are multiple ghosts in this story, Geekscapists, and they're not all of the paranormal nature. Some of them are the
That
failures.
is very true.
Yeah. And how, yeah, I'm just going to keep the hack metaphor going. What did you exercise in writing this book? I'm sorry, I tried to avoid it, but I was like, no, this is an exorcism of some of your own personal stuff, is it
It
not?
No, it absolutely is. It absolutely is. I have an ex, just like the character Joy has an ex. My relationship with my ex is a million times better than Joy's relationship with hers. But it's sort of the common feelings of how do we move on after a breakup? What if we still have feelings for someone after a breakup? How do we resolve all those unresolved feelings, all those unresolved hurts? And there's a moment when Joy goes to her ex's house and realizes that like every trace of her has been removed from the house that she used to live in, and that was a very real thing that happened to me one time. You know,
Hmm.
so I feel like for me that part of the book, that part of the story, was kind of an exorcism of getting some stuff out that um, that I just wanted to express and hadn't really expressed.
What is interesting to me is that there's also the dichotomy of life and the afterlife. But we have terms to describe the trans lifestyle, things like dead name. And we have a
Hmm.
character in this who, when they were in that prior relationship, they were in that prior relationship male presenting.
Hmm.
And now they're a female presenting. And there's that really sharp piece of dialogue when the ex gets in the car with their partner, their current, and they
Hmm.
said, "I didn't know you were married to a woman first." It was like, neither did I. Does that parallel your personal experience in your prior relationship? Were you male presenting in that first
Hmm.
relationship? So then, and so when you go to a house and the ex has erased, this is what's so sad, like personal and sad about it, because this is why it's grieving to me. This is why I started crying with Tilly on the show, because there's grief involved in that you go to a house where every like reminder that you were at one point male presenting or your old life has been erased, and that other person has done that, and they've maybe done it out of self-preservation, maybe they've done it out of respect for you, and that is what you have done to a sense of self, but you're grieving an old life, and it's so, I can see how that hits hard. And you put it in this
It's
book.
also really complicated, you know?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
very complicated emotionally, and my backstory, my personal backstory is complicated as well. So there's a lot more than I would ever want to get into,
Sure,
but
sure, sure, sure.
it's I'm
Let's talk
drawing
about
from
breakdancing Spider-Man. I'm kidding, I'm kidding, I'm
I'm drawing
kidding.
from different aspects of different relationships, and I just want to be clear that that relationship is not based very specifically on
Hmm,
one person, and a lot of it's invented. So
sure. All these characters are you in a sense, are they not? When I'm writing a character
yeah, 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 yeah,
in
exactly.
the current book I'm doing, of which David Burrows, our friend David Burrows, is very gracious and help in. I believe I'm using the same colorist as on his book Canto for Dark Horse, and you will see Geekscape. You will learn more at Geeks. I think at Comic Con you will be learning more at Geekscape about what we're working on over here Geekscape. And I think that I'm writing 3 main characters for the most part. And I keep thinking like, oh, they're my favorite. Oh no, they're my favorite. They're my favorite. But they all 3 represent different parts of me, right? Like the hope, the failure, the regret, the anger. So you're right. Like it's not that simplistic, and people are allowed to go through a spectrum of emotions as they change and learn. When you're working with a collaborator like Bill Whittingham, who's created already a sort of world as he did with Fables, what were some of the rules there in trying to be respectful of some of the stuff that Bill had established or that had come before in the Fables with the other collaborators, etc., and then finding as well some Lilah Sturges room to write some stuff for yourself? Does that make sense? Because Science of Ghosts is your creation, it's your story. When you're collaborating, what kind of wiggle room do you have, and how do you fit that stuff in? Do you need to?
It's funny, talking about being trans, and when for a lot of trans women, when you're growing up, you're presenting male, you don't really know who you are or who you're supposed to be a lot of the time. And so what you do is you figure out how to fit in, right? You identify the group that you want to belong to, and then you kind of observe, and then you sort of like, become the person that you need to be in order to fit in. And that's something that I had a lot of experience of growing up. So the only way I knew how to like be a boy, right? Was just to like try and figure out how other people did it and then do that. That actually turns out to be a really useful skill when it comes to collaborating in a pre-existing world like Lumberjanes, like Fables, like any DC superhero. In order to write that world, you have to sort of become that world a little bit. You have to understand what the rules of that world are, who these people are, how they talk, all that stuff. So I feel like I was really primed to do that in a way, and it's almost second nature to me. So if for instance, when I was writing the Magicians, writing Alice's story, I sat down and I read Lev's book like 3 times in a row in order to like get the feel of it, and then once I had it, I just could start writing in that world. Like it wasn't, there was like a conscious thought process of like, how do I come to grok this world? It was just like, okay, I've been here enough. I know how to talk like a native. Let's go.
Yeah. And eventually the fear kind of arose. Like I remember hearing about Kevin Smith and the delays, and when he took on Daredevil, it was his first comic book writing outside of the Clerks universe. This is late 90s. Geekscape is the beginning of that Marvel Knights imprint under Joe Quesada. I'm taking you back before some of your births. And I just remember reading perhaps on Wizard Magazine or something that I think Kevin's favorite comic book character, sorry Kevin, I think it's Batman, but I think Daredevil was very high up on the list, and that some of the delay in the book wasn't Joe Quesada's artwork, it was actually Kevin being like, oh my god, I'm gonna fuck this up, right? Like, oh my god, this is Daredevil, I'm gonna fuck this up, and having Daredevil in so much reverence. And people have, I was explaining to somebody the other day about like how like I'd love to do Eternals, as because the movie is the movie, but like I'd be like, oh yeah, so Eternals 2 would be so great, and it could be about rebirth and the origin of the Marvel universe and like the all this cosmic stuff, and it's beautiful, and I'd just stick to the Jack Kirby stuff. And then somebody was like, why don't you just write it? And I go, no. Like whenever somebody's like, would you want to do a Spider-Man story? No. I'm so scared. Like that's somebody else's stuff. But you're right. There's almost like an actor that has to like inhabit another character. And I think so. When you talk to actors sometimes or writers, some of them who've come from like a military family and had to go to like new schools every year or something, they had to fit into different cliques or social groups like that. And they were like, oh, this didn't work in Idaho, but let me try it in Texas, or here we are in rural New York, and this is way different.
Oh, I was a Navy brat, by the way.
There we go. There we go. I knew something was going down with that, Lilah. You had to be a chameleon, if only because you were moving all over the place.
That's right. But
And
you
then
know
on
what's funny
top of
about
that,
that
wow. Uh-huh.
is that the what happened to me when I first started writing comics was I could take on, the character or whatever. I could inhabit the character all day long. The problem came when I was trying to decide what I wanted to say with that character, and I
Mm.
think early on I had a lot of trouble distinguishing that. I think I just wanted to be I just wanted to be able to tell stories, right? I didn't think that I maybe had anything worth saying, or I was just trying to make a story that people would read, not a story that I really desperately wanted to tell, if that makes sense.
Did you have imposter syndrome? Is that what we're talking about? Like why? Like I had the
Yeah,
same.
oh,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And it took me a long time to get to the point where I was like, I'm just going to tell stories that are fun for me to tell. And it's really funny that when I really started doing that, um, I started doing some kind of unhinged stuff at DC, but this was sort of um, after I sort of stopped being like the golden child at DC, which I was for a bit, and they kind of started to ignore what I was doing after a while.
Because you had
Um,
done their voices so well, and now you're like,
yeah.
let me rock a little bit of my own stuff because my confidence is up, and I want to have fun
Well,
with
it's like
this. Yeah,
They were like, so here's this fill-in issue of Zatanna.
sure.
Write whatever you want. Like like the implication being like we don't really care what you do. Just write something, and
We got to
as
make that
long as it's not
deadline. Let's go.
terrible.
Let's go.
Yeah, we got
Yeah.
to make it up. Yeah, but so that issue of Zatanna that I wrote is like one of the best 22-page comic scripts I ever wrote in my whole life because I just I did exactly what I wanted to do, and it was so great. And ever since then, I've just tried more and more to write stories that I want to tell, to say things that I want to say that really resonate with me. And I think this is something that is very easy when you're first starting to lose sight of, is that you need to write from who you are. If you try to write from someone else's perspective, it's you're going to just end up being a cheap copy of that person. If you want to write like Jeff Johns, guess what? Jeff Johns already does that. He's
He
already
does it
got,
really well.
and he does it really well. So you might as well do you.
My Aurora over on YouTube says, "I love unhinged stuff. Thank you for leaning into it." And then Misha responds and says, "Hi, my Aurora. I like you. You guys are friends. They got friends over there on the YouTube." Um, when I get paralyzed, and I don't believe in writer's block because a part of me is like, okay, just write bad, and you're not writing in a vacuum. You're
Hmm.
gonna have, for me, it's producers. Like I knock stuff out as fast as I can to get it to producers and be like, okay, like please give me notes, or I write an outline as fast as I can to get it to a collaborator. Please notes, and they're usually producers. And I say, and I just love those people. They're my friends. They're my collaborators for a long time. So I have no fear in bouncing ideas off of them. I try and get them into a 3 act, or I try and get them in a full beginning, middle, and end when I start the inklings of it. Sometimes it gets rather long. But the fear, I just say, hey man, there's a lot of, like, we're evolved parasites on a molten rock flying through a vacuum. Who gives a shit? Like, just rip it. And
That's one way to go about it. Yeah.
I just I think the fun is a big part of it. I think what I call the Scooby Doo drafts really free me up. Where I say, okay,
Hmm.
I don't know what the scene is yet, but write it like it would be in a Scooby Doo. Like you have to get the mechanics of this person professing a love in some form. Like, make it really
Hmm.
very obvious in this first draft, and then turn it into an action, or turn it into something a little more human or tonally appropriate to the story in the next draft. Or right now, so you can
Right.
move on, so you get the structure down. It's I hate you. It's a hitting them with a mallet. It's something loud, or depending on what it is. But just get there so you can have the full structure. You know that the organism is, and then you can get into the parts later on. And when I started writing like the Looney Tunes drafts, the Scooby Doo drafts for myself as rough drafts, I could just rip them
Hmm.
off fast and then go back and revise with human revision. Um,
Yeah. You
yeah,
can't fix what doesn't exist. This is the thing that I try to tell people.
that's a great one.
Um, mhm.
That's a great one.
That's what I
Who
tell myself a lot.
who were your writing heroes growing up? Did you always want to be a writer, Lila?
I always wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a rock star more. I had very unrealistic ideas about
No,
what I was going
somebody's
to be
got to do
capable of.
it. Somebody's got to be a rock star. Who are your rock
Right.
star heroes? And those were also storytellers.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I wanted to be I wanted to be Peter Cetera. I
Oh
was
yeah.
very, very into Chicago as a young person. But then as I got a little older, then I wanted to be Ani DeFranco.
Oh
So there
yeah.
was
Ani
a
DeFranco.
real spectrum of where I started from where I ended up.
It
Um,
parallels. I mean, you didn't
there's
say. Yeah, it's not.
there's a
Yeah,
musicality to both of them. You know, there's
absolutely.
passion there. There's a lot. You know, I have a you know a vibe.
Did
But
you lose Peter Cetera around the Karate Kid 2 era where you're like, no, I'm not power, I'm not.
I never
It's
gave
such a
up
good
on Peter
song.
Cetera.
It's such a
Yeah,
good song.
so good.
And I
Yeah.
remember Ani DeFranco was a very 90s. I really like that whole thing was huge. I was more like Liz Fair and like the Breeders.
Okay,
That I started
sure.
going that way, and then and that kind of led me to Kim Shatuk and the Muffs. And Kim Shatuk to
Okay.
me is like she just had that roar. I loved it. It was a little punk rock, and I loved that. Um, that was my crush. My first crush was Belinda Carlisle. She's
Well,
amazing.
yeah.
Belinda
How could you
Carlisle
not have a
is
crush
so
on
hot.
Belinda
And
Carlisle?
then
She is incredible.
it ended up becoming Liz Fair. And it was like, oh, these are the rock girls who I was like, oh, girl with a guitar? Tell me more. Uh,
Sure. Liz Fair is a absolute dream. Yeah. Who wouldn't be in love with Liz Fair? Hmm.
and so, did you learn an instrument? How far did you go down the road
Not yet.
of I'm gonna be a rocker?
I
Because you're
well,
still kind of
I
rocking. Can we just say that you're still kind of rocking? Give yourself
thank
that
you.
credit of
I
the
mean,
rocking.
I learned to play bass first, and then guitar, and also some keyboards. And I recorded a bunch of music on my own when I was a kid. And then I was in a couple of bands in high school and in college. And then right after college, I was in a band in Austin called Those Who Dig. I was the bass player and one of the songwriters. And we just had a 30-year reunion. I shouldn't say how many
No, don't
years
say
because I
that.
don't know how old I am.
But if you're in Austin
A
and not in a band,
multi-year,
like what
yeah,
the
yeah,
fuck are you
yeah.
doing there?
It's like early '90s. We were the band after Twang Twang that played the West Mall. That was
Oh my
kind of our
god.
little claim to fame.
Do you
And
remember? I mean, of course you remember Liberty Lunch.
of course, I remember Liberty Lunch.
Liberty
We played there for
Lunch
South by Southwest,
in,
baby.
in Geekscape, Liberty Lunch was owned by a man named Mark Prats, who's still a friend of mine on Facebook. And Liberty Lunch is the only concert venue that I was allowed to go to in high school on a before I got my driver's license. Because, or during a week, I couldn't really go during a school night. But Mark was my fourth grade teacher, and he
Ooh,
owned Liberty Lunch, and I was allowed to go to Liberty Lunch, and then eventually Emos when I started booking punk rock shows there in Austin. But Liberty Lunch, like that's the soul of the city right there. And when they kind of bulldozed that
absolute soul
warehouse
of the city.
district to build the city
Hmm.
hall. Did you hear Liberty Lunch is coming back as part of one of the restaurants or one of the what is it? What's the barbecue place? Stubbs. Stubbs,
Oh, really?
I think Stubbs wants to rename their outdoor concert space
That
in
place, Liberty
like
Lunch.
a Liberty Lunch like reverence
Okay,
thing. And I'm all
okay. I got
for
to ask you
people
though.
learning about old Austin. Yeah,
Yeah, I agree. I got to ask you, what's the best show you ever saw at Liberty Lunch?
Green Day and Bad Religion. Green Day opening for Bad Religion. Um, that
Nice.
was September, October 93, I think. The one
Hmm.
that I cared about the most, in retrospect, having lost my brother later that year in '96, was I got grounded for going to NoFX on a school night, and I got grounded for going to NoFX on a school night, and I went with my brother. And looking back, I wish I'd gotten grounded every day for a year, knowing that he wasn't going to be with us. Um,
Yeah,
and I saw Archer's Loaf open for Weezer. I saw a couple of Rancid shows. I mean, Liberty Lunch was the place, and I loved it.
it was.
And I was allowed to go because it was it was all ages. And my fourth grade. What's the worst that could happen? My fourth grade teacher owned it. What's the worst that could happen? Tell that to the girl who pierced her tongue outside in the alleyway. Yes, we all watched her. We're like, is she really going to do this? And then she pierces her tongue. She almost passed the fuck out. We're like, she just died.
The first time I did acid was at Liberty Lunch. Like, it wasn't that wholesome.
No. And Mark's daughter used to run the bar, and she definitely was not a bartending age. And like, I just loved it, and it's so great seeing Mark post these things on social media. Hey, Mark, I'm going to tag you on this episode because Lilah and I are going down, memory lane, and then when it closed, it's just like Emo's was great, and Misha said the original Emo's bathroom right there on Red River and 6th, like that was like a dare, but. Yeah. Look at, when I went to school in Philly and New York, and I would go to the original, what's it called? They took the toilets out of it and put them in Las Vegas. The major famous concert venue that I'm blanking on, the Ramones and Blondie and all of them went to. Those CBGBs, those bathrooms were fucking disgusting. I would rather lick part of the subway system than anything in that bathroom. Like they were disgusting, and I loved going there. Seeing bands like the Queers and Dynamite Boy and the Bouncing Souls and all that stuff, I miss that stuff. I miss Austin. I didn't want you to make me homesick, but you made me homesick for, again, another ghost, a city that's no longer that city. And Portland, is Portland going to go the way of Austin? Is it going to become one of those ghosts where it's like...
I think Portland has a whole lot of what I would call cultural density, that there's a lot of people who are doing a lot of culture here.
Austin doesn't have that anymore? I haven't lived there in...
Austin doesn't have that anymore.
Okay, it's all tech bros and
Austin
Teslas.
has that with food now, which it didn't used to have. Okay. Austin was not a food city before, but Austin isn't like doing a bunch of really exciting, cool. Of course, now I'm going to get like hate mail from people in Austin being like, "Austin is still fantastic. What are you talking about?"
As they're driving a Cybertruck. Enough.
It wasn't my Austin anymore. Let's put it that way. It didn't feel like my Austin anymore. Portland feels like home to me.
When they took down Fran's Hamburgers, when they took down that red-haired girl on Fran's Hamburgers, like on South Congress, like it was done. Remember that? Fran with the hamburger? When they took her down, it was done.
They got rid of Lucy in Disguise. That was like, for me, the final straw.
We used to rent Christmas outfits there so that I could dress as Santa every year for my stepmom's work Christmas party. And I was always Santa because I had the person, I was like, ho, 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 kids. And I was always having to give out gifts to the kids. And Lucy in Disguise was where you'd go automatically for all the costumes. And South Congress, when they started calling it SoCo, I think it was done.
Yeah, that was really the line where you're like, wait, this is weird. This is not in our control anymore. Something bad has happened, and we don't hold the reins to this town anymore.
But Portland, you got a chance.
Yeah, and also I have nothing to compare Portland with. Like, I don't know what old Portland was like.
Sure.
I heard someone say, "Oh, if you're coming here for that Portlandia stuff, that ended 15 years ago." But I don't know. It still seems a lot like that to me.
And so you're playing in a band. Did you always love comics? Was comics always a potential outlet? Was it always something that you read? Like, talk to me about how the transition then happened to comics. How did the writing start? Because you were always writing. If you're in a band, you're writing. If you're always a storyteller.
Sure.
Right?
I was always a story. I mean, I always wrote things. I wrote poems. I wrote stories. I wrote songs. And I've never really distinguished too much, like, it's like different ways of expressing yourself, right? But when I came to UT, one of the first people I met was a fellow by the name of Chris Robertson, whose work you might be familiar with, iZombie, a bunch of Hellboy stuff. And Chris introduced me to comics. He was the guy who had like grown up reading comics and knew everything about them. And I used to just sit there and listen to him tell me about like DC Comics continuity, just tell me like the history of the Legion of Superheroes. We would just sit and he would just tell me, and I would be entranced by it. It was also fascinating to me because I had no clue about any of it. Yeah. And I think the first thing he gave me that I actually liked was Sandman. And once I got to that book, my brain just exploded because it was like, this is like it's written just for me. You know, it's like it's smart, it's passionate, it's strange, it's like subtly kind of gay, and
I
so
mean,
it
how
like has.
subtle.
I mean, it's not that subtle. At the beginning, it starts out a
Yes,
little subtle, and then it
because
gets
fucking
it
Batman's
ramps
still
up.
in the book, right? Like Geekscape is who
Yeah,
reads
yeah,
Sandman. They're like, oh shit. I mean, it's still in the DC universe in some form,
yeah.
and there's still like DC characters in the very beginning. But then by the end of it, it's like, no,
It's
no,
so
now we're
weird.
roaring.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's kind of weird when those
you see
DC
like
ones pop up.
you see like the Martian version of Dream at one point, and he looks kind
Hmm.
of like Martian Manhunter. Like it's like
Yeah,
what's happening? This is so weird.
yeah.
But that was my gateway drug was Sandman, and from there, you know, I always really loved the books that were, you know, those original Vertigo books.
Hmm.
You know, the Grant Morrison stuff, you
Preacher
know,
books.
anything drawn by Chris McCullough, I loved. Um, you know, and there was so much of that stuff in the late '80s, early '90s that you could sink your teeth into. That's what drew me into comics.
Yeah, and at the same time, like, we got Dark Horse over across the, doing their thing as the big indie publisher. Yeah, I mean, Image is clearly an indie
Yes,
publisher, but they were very much in the lane of superheroes and all that stuff coming out of the Marvel kids, and I love the
absolutely.
Image stuff. But
Dark Horse Presents was my
oh my
entree
god,
to so much stuff that I
Paul
wouldn't have known
Chadwick's
about otherwise.
Concrete, Paul Chadwick's
Yes.
Concrete is beautiful, and I read Peter Jackson's script for Concrete before Peter Jackson broke. Before, I think it was around the time he was doing Heavenly Creatures. He had written
Mhm.
a script for Paul Chadwick's Concrete,
Wow.
and it was wonderful. And speaking of iZombie, like Mike Allred in Madman. And I loved Madman.
Oh,
And Geekscape is,
Madman.
you of
Yes.
course know Hellboy, but Madman to me was
Hmm.
the Robert Rodriguez movie that never happened. It was the superhero who came back from the dead, was a bit of a
Hmm.
Frankenstein, but he's covered in, I guess, like a giant pajama. And he's got like the yo-yo in a zip gun as an action. He's fighting like cool mods and aliens and flying around in zip cars.
It's
I
such
love
a
Madman.
it's such a vibe. Like Madman is like if X-Ray Specs were a comic, like Madman. Yeah, God, I love that book so much.
I
I
love
even get so
Madman
excited about
too.
it.
And when they
Mhm.
kept talking about the flirting of a movie about Madman and this and that, I was like, oh my God, we're going to get a Madman movie. And then the director would disappear and Robert Rodriguez wouldn't have it
Mhm.
anymore. And, I was like, guys, I don't know how you do a Madman movie, but I think you're right.
I
It's
don't
a
know.
vibe. And, and I don't know. I mean, there's a fourth Hellboy movie that long time old school Geekscape guest Brian Taylor is doing with Mike Mignola, and there's a fourth Geekscape, fourth Hellboy,
Mhm.
The Crooked Man, which I liked as a comic, and they're doing it. And it looks a little A24 on the trailer. Best of luck to former Geekscape guest Brian Taylor and all those guys. Like, I'll watch any
Yeah,
Hellboy anything, but
absolutely.
that late
But yeah, I
'80s,
just wanted to
early
circle back
'90s.
though
Yes,
about a
please.
concrete movie because
Oh,
if someone were to do a concrete movie now as like an A24 movie, but like with the with the concrete CGI done like seamlessly,
beautifully. It's got to
right?
be beautiful.
To where it has to be perfect, to where like it just has to look like him, you know,
Look like
and
him.
but like not look CGI-y, you know, like any hint
No.
of Uncanny Valley would ruin it.
And I think that, like, and not, think what you will about Spike Jones is where the wild things are, but those wild things, the creatures and the wild things, those felt like real creatures. They did not feel,
Hmm.
like you said, but having a man in a concrete suit, it's like the thing Geekscapists, and what it is like, the main character Concrete is a political speechwriter, and he's going through a divorce, and his buddy takes him out camping, who's like, hey man, let me get you through this, like, and while they're camping they get like alien abducted, and his brain gets taken out of his body, and that's horrifying. Like, that is some A24 horrifying,
Hmm.
really scary shit. And he gets his brain put in a concrete body, like he's experimented on by aliens, and then he managed to escape the spacecraft, but he's, who knows what happened to his body. Like other deer, like deer got abducted and messed with, and like his buddy never got seen again, and he gets back to Earth and he's stuck in his concrete body, and he makes like chairs out of cinder blocks and stuff like that, and he sits in like an Eagle Rock warehouse, like where the Beastie Boys like recorded their albums, like, you know, Atwater Village, Eagle Rock, and he's just like,
Yeah.
he's not the
And
thing.
he's just a guy.
He's just gonna
a
write.
guy.
He's just
He's
gonna
some guy who
contemplate.
wants- yeah. Mm-hmm.
And every now and then, like, someone's like, the car's out of control, and he'll stop a car, but other than that, he's just gonna write. It's beautiful. I mean, how would you do it? And of course, like the bean counters will be like, but there's action, right? You can't just have a contemplative high, you know, guy in us. He's got to stop a robbery, or he's got to save a kid.
That's why it has to be A24.
It's got to be
A24. Yeah.
you know, Mike Mills, who does like movies like that. Like Mike Mills did Thumbsucker and stuff like that. Like Mike Mills is kind of an indie filmmaker. Like I was like, what if Mike Mills did a comic movie? Like that's how it feels like. It feels like something that's just really contemplative, and you're with a guy who can't feel a human touch again, and he does fall in love, but he has to love from afar and all this stuff. And you go, concrete. Oh man, you got me wanted to do like read so much concrete over again. I still have all those concrete issues.
So go to your comic shop, pick up my book, and pick up the first concrete collection. You'll be doing yourself a favor.
Of ghosts. So as you're getting into comic book writing, how did you get into it? How did you ask for that first gig? How did you write that first script? How did you learn it? Because you have an example of full script. Is it full script that you have? Yeah, you have an example of your full script here in the Science of Ghost Trade. How did you start learning those pieces? And like, how did you approach an editor for the first time? Did you write an indie book? And like right now, people are putting them on Kickstarter, and they're kind of, you know, putting their Kickstarters where their mouths are.
I was in a writing group called Clockwork Storybook with Bill Willingham and Chris Robertson and a guy named Mark Finn.
Some pretty good company.
We created a website, and we published stories on this website. And I wrote a novel at that time as well. And Bill Willingham had passed on that novel to Shelley Bond at Vertigo. And she read it and liked it. And so when it came time for him to do the Jack of Fables spin-off, he suggested that I co-write it with him because he just didn't have the time to do it himself. And that's pretty much all there was to it. And I hate telling that story to people because I really just sort of fell backwards into writing comics. Like I didn't even try that hard.
Nobody gets anywhere without somebody helping them out. All right? Like, yeah, exactly. That's just the truth, Geekscape.
Yeah. But it's just weird because I didn't like set out to be a comic book writer. It just kind of happened to me. But I love it. And obviously I've you know, worked very hard at it over the years.
Do you think of writing in other mediums, film or TV?
Absolutely. I just started writing a novel, which is a murder mystery. Something that I've always wanted to do is write a prose murder mystery novel. And since I did Science of Ghost, I was like, okay, I can write a mystery story.
Got my toe wet.
Let's take this
go.
one step further. You know, let's do a mystery novel. See what happens. But it's very hard. It's very hard to do prose after years and years of doing comics. The mechanics are just really rusty at the nuts and bolts of it. Like, how do you describe something? How do you? Is that
an artist? The artist is supposed to put skin on that thing. Why? What words do I have to do so? Yeah,
like, I'm used to just saying, you know, there's a ball on the table. Boom.
Sure.
And then it's like, there's a beautiful ball on the table. But if I were writing that in a prose story, I'd probably have to come up with something a little more artistic than there's a ball on the table. I might want to describe that ball. I might want to tell you what color it is, how big it is. I might need to know things. I mean, God, there's just so much that goes into it.
It's scary, the balance with trusting. No, I don't know if that's the word. With allowing your reader to meet you halfway, because you can still write there's a ball on the table. You can still write there's a ball on the table, and hope that your reader and whoever they are, that stranger in their life, the culmination of their life experiences, puts something similar to what you thought on there, and you're still leaving so much trust in their hands. But that is where the insecurity jumps back in, and you have to keep. It's not a good gig for a control freak, because you end up overwriting like crazy, right? But I think that's where some of the writing anxiety kicks in, as you're control freaking. Could be in like, you gotta no, the ball's got to be very specific, but then you're not leaving any room for your reader to make the story theirs, I guess, you know?
Yeah, one of my favorite books is Dune, Frank Herbert's Dune, and all the Dune books. I'm absolutely crazy about them. And so I was thinking about, the Paul Atreides is from the planet Caladan. His father is, the Duke of Caladan. Of House Atreides, and their home planet is this Caladan. It's a water world. It's an ocean world, and they live in this castle called Castle Caladan. And I have this like very distinct idea of what Castle Caladan looks like in my head from reading that novel for the first time. And so I went back to try and find where Frank Herbert describes what that castle looks like in the novel. I read and read and read and read. Here is how he describes that castle. Tumble down pile of stones. That's it. That's the entire, there's no other description of that place at all. He just said just enough to put the idea in your head of that castle, and then he just let you draw the whole rest of it yourself. It's amazing
That's a great line.
How powerful the imagination is. If you just seed it just right, the reader will do all that work themselves.
A tumble down pile of stones, and it has movement in it, which is what's beautiful about that. And usually when you're thinking of a structure, it does not have, it might have flowing, it might have some form of arches, but a tumble down, it has gravity to it, it has like a weight to it. That's amazing.
Exactly.
It also talks about how it weathers a planet of water. Like, this is what a genius. That's incredible. And so maybe it's not the simplicity of saying like, yeah, you could just put a ball on the table. It's how you put a ball on the table. Maybe that is the economy of that line is the word isn't putting a ball on the table. The word is the movement of putting that ball on the table, and what word of movement you're going to describe that. And in doing so with one or two words, it's going to give the weight, it's going to give the direction, it's going to give the tone. This is what we spend hours on. People are like,
I know.
You've been gone a long time. Are you sure you're writing? It's like, yeah, I'm actually like, I can't find the right word. Jackknife on YouTube says, I have a dark gray ball on my table. It's inflatable, and you place it between your lower back and the chair when you sit at the table. Heidi's got that one. She's got a yoga ball back here because she's a month from giving birth, and she's using the yoga ball to like not be super uncomfortable. Maya Aurora over on YouTube says, thank you for highlighting the difference between novels and comics. Definitely different writing styles. Yeah, the flow is hard in comics. It's not a screenplay at all. It feels like I'm shot listing while I'm writing.
Yeah. It's a whole set of skills writing comics that I think people aren't aware of when they try to do it for the first time.
Yeah, and the trust you have with an artist. Like, if you don't have a relationship with that artist, that is it takes a while. It takes that's one thing I never appreciate when I have a new artist, a new collaborator, is like, oh, they're not that, and especially like one of my artists is Chilean, and I can write in Spanish, and I write it in Spanish and this and that, but it's still like, you're still bridging. I've never been to Chile. It's not Mexico. It's not Brazil, which I've written for. Like, you're still bridging a bunch of gaps there. And some of the words don't translate, and then when you start to describe things to an Italian colorist or something, it's like the whole idea of writing comics. What I love about the collaborative nature of comics is that you're actually bridging a lot of gaps, and it's actually helping you as a writer and communicator. And I can see why the parachute and the safety stuff goes away when you're writing prose. It's like, ooh, it's just you and the reader, Lilah. You better hit with those tumblestones.
That's true. I actually have a great story about working with an artist for whom English was not his first language.
Okay.
This was when I was writing House of Mystery, and Luca Rossi was drawing it. And I love Luca to bits. He's an amazing artist. And he was really good at drawing whatever was in my head, which is my favorite thing when an artist can draw whatever was in my head. And he was really good at it. But one time he got the script, and in the script I had written that we were in a demon's office in hell, right? And this demon was like, he was like a middle manager. And I said that he had on his wall one of those hang in there posters with like the little
The
cat
kitty,
hanging
yeah.
from the branch. I just thought it would be really funny if this demon had that poster, right? And so I sent that on. Well, Luca had never seen that poster. That did not make it to Italy. So he drew something that is so much better than what I asked for, which is he drew a kitten being hung by its neck from a noose hanging from a branch, and the caption, "Hang in there."
It is a demon's office. It is in hell.
Demon's office.
Nailed it.
Yeah. I was like, no, that's perfect.
That's horrifying. I love it. You'll be at San Diego Comic-Con, Lilah?
Not
for
this year.
For this? Not this
I
year?
will not be
Okay.
this year.
I was going to invite you to come sign some of these at the Geekscape booth if you make it. But we'll
that'd
find
be great.
we'll find something else.
Mhm.
Jackknife is like, I need that poster. Yeah, that poster sounds great. Well, Geekscape is like, you got to go to your local comic book shop and you got to ask them if they have the Science of Ghosts. You're going to go there and you're gonna flip through it and see what you think. You know, you like it. Lilah, the book is also, we didn't even talk about the book is in black and white.
It is.
Was there a temptation to color it at any point? Because I have colored an artist whose black and white was beautiful, and it took me forever to find a colorist that respected the black and white to where I did not think that they destroyed it. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to destroy the black and white, and it took me forever to find a colorist that respected it enough to not just blanket it.
Sure.
Talk about that decision to do a black and white book.
When I was discussing this with Jan Jones, who was my original editor on the book, and we're sort of going back.
Oh, I love Jan. Roller Derby Jan, who like loves Weird Al.
Yes,
Jan's
Weird Al
awesome. Jan is awesome.
Jan's one of my favorite people in the whole world.
Jan is incredible. Jan, love you. Absolutely love you.
We love you so much. We absolutely
okay. Oh my God, the world just keeps getting smaller. Lilah, why are you not on Geekscape years ago? Okay.
Jan championed this book. Jan went out of her way to buy this book because she wanted to do it so badly, and she was just the most supportive editor on the planet. I would work with her again in a heartbeat. And but one of the things we talked about was like what kind of art style we wanted, and we kept kind of coming back to a something muted, something noir, and then finally we're like, let's just like do it in black and white.
Just make it noir.
Just do that. Yeah, and just literally make it noir, and I think it came out great.
Yeah, I think if you, imagining the book with color does take away from that noir tone, and this is very, even though it doesn't take place in the 40s Geekscapists, it doesn't take place with a bunch of gumshoes and that stuff, but it is very noir in tone, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it does start with a mystery and keeps going, and awesome. And the Geekscape is watching on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook. The cover looks like this. The main character is in color up against a black and white background. The Science of Ghosts. That's what you're going to look for at your local comic book store. Lilah, where can we find you on socials? Where can kids continue to support?
I'm currently in hiding on social media right now. I am on Instagram at Lilah K. Sturges. I am on Blue Sky at lilahtsturges.com.
You have your own website where people can see your authoring?
Sure. They can go to lilahtsturges.com and poke around. I think it's has not been updated to include Science of Ghosts yet, but you can just assume that book has come out because it has.
Geekscape is whatever Lilah does, we will amplify. So this is a good place to check as well. Geekscape is the podcast, and we're on socials and all that. If you go to places like Facebook and look for Geekscape, you'll find our Geekscape Forever group where you can talk to other Geekscapists. Clearly, you can do it on socials. We even got friends over here on the YouTube talking to each other. Maybe they're strangers, maybe they're longtime friends. Whatever is happening, Geekscape is about the connectivity that stories give us and bring us together, and that in itself is the Geekscape. This little expanse of collectiveness through pop culture and all that.
You had mentioned LinkedIn, and so I was going to do this whole bit where I was going to say, like, my entire social media presence was in the form of LinkedIn comments, but I didn't get to it, so I'm just...
Great job on that new gig. Hey, way to go on your 5-year anniversary. People give me... People are like, wow, you've been at Geekscape 20 years. Like, yeah, it's my company. Like, congrats on your work anniversary. Geekscape is like my hobby anniversary, motherfucker. Like, what? Geekscape is... I'm going to turn around with there's an actress from The Acolyte, Amy Sang, who wants to come on and talk. So that's the next episode. We have 2 more episodes, and then we have the Geekscape 700. And I think we're going to have a bunch of people from the last couple of years of Geekscape on to do a round table, because I think that's the Geekscape right before San Diego Comic-Con, of which, sorry, I'm going to be there for preview night. I'm going to go down there, set up the booth, hang out for preview night, and then my butt's jumping in a car and coming back, and I'm getting a catcher's mitt, and I'll be ready to become a dad, because that is, Heidi's like, are you sure you're going to Comic-Con? Like, we are in the danger zone. So if I'm not at Comic-Con, it's because the baby came. If I'm at Comic-Con, Heidi is probably at the hotel, and we are probably like, okay, what's the closest hotel in San Diego? Because
I was going to say, this is like a romantic comedy waiting to happen.
yeah. We are in... Yeah, that is what's going on, Geekscape. So we have Geekscape 698 coming up with Amy Sang. So hit subscribe, share Geekscape with all your friends. I've got one more Geekscape, and then we got Geekscape 700, and then we got the Comic-Con go. We got lots of friends signing at the booth. We have a new booth location this year too, because you heard the drama about the old booth location. I'll take full responsibility for being a jerk. And thank you, Comic-Con, for being accommodating and not just canceling us. And love you guys. Subscribe, share, go listen to Adam Nimoy episode. Do whatever you guys want to do. It's your life. We just like to pop in and say hi. Thank you, Lilah, for being a part of this.
Thank you so much.
Don't hate, create, Geekscapists. Peace.